Good afternoon and welcome again to another episode of the Legacy Men's podcast here at the Depot at Cornerstone Church. My name is Gary Trevor. I am the host. My co-host is Jason Gonzalez and Ryan Dunnan. And today we're ecstatic to have one of our directors here at Cornerstone Church, Brian.
Yeah, thank you very much for tuning in here at the Legacy Men's podcast, where we learn how to live and leave a godly legacy. I wanted to take the time to thank y'all again for sharing this content, for subscribing. Keep that going for us. We have some great episodes coming up, so make sure you click that notification bell. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, my pleasure, man.
Yeah. So
Cool.
today we're talking about Man in the Mirror.
Yep.
Which I'm pretty excited. It's not about Michael Jackson. So if you guys are wondering what that's about, it's not. So
About looks.
yeah. But yeah, we're excited to kind of dig into your testimony. Gary, I know you kind of like to kick us off.
Yep, no worries. So, Brian, tell us about your mom, dad, any siblings, where you were raised, how you were raised, did you have a Christian background, and get us down to when you actually then started going to elementary school.
Okay, got it.
It's a little bit of history, but I know you can get through that with ease.
And I'll make sure we gear it towards finding Christ. Too,
Yes,
in my
absolutely,
life,
most
and how
important.
That was implemented throughout it. So, rewind the tape, go all the way back. I was born.
I'm glad. I'm so glad.
But I guess where I could start off is my parents' involvement in church. My dad, Robert, my mom, Rosemary. I have an older brother who's a pastor, a younger brother, and a sister. Let's start off with my dad and what brought us to church. So when I was a couple years old, it was just me and my brother at the time. My parents were living a life in sin. They didn't know Christ. They grew up Catholic, so they had an understanding, but they didn't really have a relationship with God. And my dad, in the life of sin, horrible things happen, and my aunt was murdered. And my dad wanted revenge on the man.
Yeah,
What happened?
No tapping.
no tapping.
Oh.
Yeah, we don't do tapping on the table, unfortunately. It gets picked up. Go ahead,
What do I
Brian.
do about my nervousness? Just stand like this and rock back and forth.
Just twinkle your nose, that's all right.
Okay. Getting back to the story, so my aunt gets murdered. My dad wants revenge on this guy, so he finds out that this guy is in maximum security prison, and he's like, "All right, how am I going to go and get my hands on this guy?" So he decides to rob a Circle K with a shotgun because it's armed robbery, and that puts him in maximum security. And as he's trying to kill this guy, eventually, long story short, he finds Jesus. He finds God, accepts him into his life. And once he gets out on early release because of the circumstances. He takes our family to church.
But let me insert one thing which was so powerful, which in actual fact, without Christ, you are the walking dead. Describe to us what your dad told you guys, why he didn't take the guy out in maximum. Because he saw him.
Okay, he
That's
did
a super
see
powerful
him,
thing.
which is wild. So he had it all planned out. He found out where the guy was, the pod he was in, how he can get in there, get a hold of him. And the opportunity eventually came, which is wild. Eventually came, and he was getting ready to do it, ready to murder this guy. And when he looked at him and seen him, he just seen death in this guy. And that's physically and maybe even metaphorically. He just saw sin on this guy, just wear him out. And over time, he said it was just drained in his face. Which is really, really eye-opening, because in the time my dad's living in sin too, and it's almost like the mirror simile. It's almost a reflection of a life full of sin and where life can lead you.
Yeah.
So after that, he really started thinking. He was already reading the Bible. He was already getting convicted because he said even the guards in there were telling him, "You're not fooling us. We see you guys all the time. You're in there, you're reading the Bible, you say you're going to change, but as soon as you get out there, you don't change. You get right back to what you were doing, and I'm certain I'll see you again," he said the guard would tell him or told him. So that really convicted him, and seeing that guy really hit him hard. So when he got out, he promised that he would live for Christ for the rest of his life. So he started taking us to church, and I'm still a kid, and I just remember seeing his dedication, glimpses of it as I got older. I mean, even when the car broke down, he's like, all right, we're going to walk to church. We're going to get ourselves to church one way or another. We want to live by church. Church is what helps us. That's the best place for us to be to work on our relationship with God.
Yeah, you mentioned that this is a good thing that basically got embedded in you was a really good term that I heard you use. And this is also a great thing for listeners, as parents or if you are a mentor or you have people that you influence in your life, it's great for you to show them this level of the discipline that it takes to take your kids or take your whomever that is that looks up to you to church.
Yeah.
It gets embedded in it because you weren't. I think you had mentioned it was like you hadn't grabbed all of it conceptually yet, right? It's like
No. I didn't understand it. I was starting to understand there's a God.
Yeah.
We serve him, but I didn't understand everything in its totality. So, but witnessing my dad's commitment, my mom's commitment to God and to church, that's something that I grew up and it was embedded into me. That even when I drifted off, I still knew in the back of my mind, like, this isn't right. I need to get back to the foundation that I was taught. Get back to Christ, get back to God, because that's the only proper way to live life.
So this is where, and this is really good because I think a lot of men will experience this with just moving a lot. You talked about you lived in a lot of different places, and this is where a persona was created, basically. So you moved to a lot of different schools. I think it was close to 8 times, if I'm not mistaken. Walk us through that and just kind of, as a child, what age and then what started to be created from that? Like what did you go through?
Yeah, and then just to allude to what we were talking to before, my parents didn't have it all together, and as I got older, I started to realize that. But one thing's for certain is they had God, and I think that's so vital when we have kids. Like, we may not be doing everything properly. We're gonna fail. We're gonna mess up. But if we show them that as long as God is involved and our focus is on Him, then anything is possible through Christ.
Amen.
And that's all
100%.
that matters, is leaning on Him and having Him in our life. But so as I got older, my dad became a pastor. And I think he became a pastor when I was in, I want to say, 3rd, 4th grade, roughly right around there. And so we began to move a lot because he would be pastors of different churches. So we'd move to different areas from Phoenix, California, back to Arizona. And as I moved around, go to different schools, and I was always confronted with fitting in with people. We're supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. But where I found myself as I got older is wanting to constantly look like what the people were wherever I was, because I wanted to fit in, which is, it's good to have friends. You want your kids to socialize, be involved, but it's important not to be of the world. Yeah. So whatever it looked like, whether I was riding a skateboard, which I love skateboarding, that was fun. But whatever it was, the hairstyle, the way they dressed, I wanted to do that so I can fit in with them.
Yeah, this was like so you put a mirror in front of them, meaning whoever that individual is that you're trying to please, so that they can see themselves a little bit more in you.
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
It's almost like a constant revolving door of just like, how do I get this person to see themselves and what they like enough to value me for what they might see in my reflection, which is so crazy because this isn't what I love about this isn't a childhood thing. Like, we're still children of God, but we struggle with this a lot throughout the entirety of our life.
Right, always.
Perception versus reality.
Yeah.
Right? So I love this man in the mirror thing because I think it's so powerful what we have to go through with the world telling us this is the way you should look, this is the way you should be, these are the things you should indulge in, right? And it's constant. But I love this as, like, you're going through it because you're going through it as a child, and you're just kind of like, gosh, it's just the way that it is. Like, you didn't intentionally try to chase the world. You were just like, man, I just want some friends. Like, I just want to go have fun. And like, my environment is changing a lot, right? And this struggle then kind of with your relationship with Jesus was also growing distant
Yeah, because the more I try to look like those other kids, especially as I got older into high school, because I did accept God into my life at an early age.
Okay.
I accepted him into my life, but I always found myself in this predicament. Well, am I really going to try to look more like Christ, or am I going to try to look more like the kids I'm around? And the older I got as I went into high school, the more that mattered to me. Well, the more it mattered to me to look like the other kids. Man, kids are ruthless, man.
Yep.
Yeah.
Kids are ruthless. You got to be ready. You
Yep.
got to be ready. You got to teach your kids because, man, they'll what is it? What do they refer to
Peer
it as
pressure?
now? Peer pressure, but it's, I would say blackball, but cancel you. Oh man,
Oh,
that'll
yeah.
get so quick. I'm trying to think of the terminology they use.
Exactly.
Yeah, he'll get
My
canceled
grandson
out
uses
quick.
that all the time.
Yeah.
But I want to get into when your father picked up a pastorate in Cape Town, South Africa, my favorite city in South Africa. Tell us about what happened there, which was certainly a change in your life.
Yeah, so I had this constant struggle with my relationship with God because I was trying to have a relationship with the world. And once I turned 16, my dad and mom became missionaries in South Africa, and I had to go with them. And that was very tough. So they were in Cape Town, South Africa. They started a church in Atlantis, which was a wild experience. And when I look back and think about it, and of course it made me grateful at that age, but at that age, I didn't want to be in Africa, especially in a township. Oh man, it was night and day compared to America.
Culture shock.
So my parents knew this, so my mom finally met me halfway and said, well, you still have your senior year to complete in high school. If you finish, or not if, when you finish all your work, I'll send you back to America. I said, okay, challenge accepted. Boom, 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 got it all knocked out in 3 months. I'm ready to go. I'm ready, I'm out of here. Yeah, so they sent me back. I was just shy of 18, and the world is my oyster. I have no parents covering me, and I still have this battle I'm dealing with of wanting to fit in with the world and putting my relationship with God on the back end, unfortunately.
And this is you moving in with your older brother. Where were you at that time?
Yeah, I was in Chandler. So I move in with him. He lives in a house of men. He was only, I want to say 19 at the time. He's only a couple years older than me. So I move in there, and the one rule of the house is you have to go to church. There's 3 services a week. So I'm like, all right, that sounds good. So I'm living there for a couple of weeks, and I miss a service. Rightfully so. I broke the rules, so I get kicked out of the home. I get kicked out, and at that time, I was just kind of dabbling in sin. I wasn't fully committing to God. When that happened, I said, forget this. I'm just gonna write God off, and I'm diving headfirst into sin, and I'm gonna do what I want. And that's what I did, unfortunately.
Yeah, this was a painful moment for you, which I appreciate just kind of the sincerity of, man, this is my older brother kicking me out. Like, you had your laundry bin just full of your stuff, and nowhere to go. So you started couch surfing.
Couch surfing anywhere, make money where I can. It was very tough, and it really it made me grow cold to not just God, but Christians in general. It gave me such a bad taste that I wrote God off, Christians, the religion as a whole, and just decided to do my own thing. And that's really when the whirlwind began, because I was couch surfing. Eventually, I started rooming with some friends when I started making some money, and we were young kids who were sinners, indulging what the world had to offer us. So our house became the party house for everybody. Everybody, even during the week. And then, of course, on weekends. So much so, cops would come during the week, shine lights in on our house just to check in on us. And they would do their routes, check in on us on weekends. It was just a wild scene. And it seemed like I had it together, especially at that age when you're 19, 20 years old. You have the party house, you're making some money. Things look pretty good. You got the girls. So it looked like I had everything together, and I was building my own world without God. But eventually it led to It led to a child out of wedlock, my son. A girl that I was partying with and dating, she ended up getting pregnant, and my son came along, which my son is a total blessing. I love my son.
Awesome.
But it was out of wedlock. It wasn't in the proper setting that God tells us to do it in.
Yeah.
And so that shifted things a bit. I ended up getting half custody of him. Me and her weren't aligned. I thought about coming back to God. I started talking to God. I'm like, hey, I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm in a tough spot. I need some help. Like many of us have done or may do when we're in a tough time. It's like, all right, God, I need you.
Yeah.
Remember me? I took off on you, but
Yeah.
I need some of your help now.
I'm like picturing you like walking in and like taking a ticket, you know, like
Yeah.
out of that like red
Hey.
thing, like, oh, yeah.
Like Beetlejuice. Have you
Yeah.
seen it? A long line. Yeah. Long line waiting,
Yeah.
God. Let me know when you're ready to get to me.
So you had half custody of your son. So when you were with your son, I mean, you were living pretty straight. But when you didn't have your son, that's when you would just indulge in sin and just do everything.
Exactly. When I had my son, my priority was to be a father. I at least had enough sense to do that. I was like, okay, when I have him, I need to be here for him. I need to help him. I need to teach him. And I need to be a father to him. So that was priority. But when I didn't have him, exactly, like I'm going to keep doing my own thing. I tried to get close to, not even that I tried, it was a thought to get close to God.
Yeah.
But the desire really wasn't there.
Yeah. This is a
drifted
good
away.
one for a lot of men because this is just the way that we are, right? Like women probably struggle with this too, but I think more so men is I'll pray, but I'm not going to change my life. Like I'll pray again, but I'm not going to change this. And it's like you were talking about just being stubborn, and we just are naturally, right? It's like we know what our sin is, like we can sense it, but we're like, yeah, but I prayed though, so that's good. But I'm not going to change that.
Right. We try to tuck it away and keep it away from God. Like, hey, help me with this.
Yeah.
Don't look at this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But poison, just a little bit amount can kill the whole body. My appendix, I had my appendix burst inside of me.
Okay.
And it affected my whole body. I had
Wow.
to learn to walk again off of that. But the poison spread so much. Like if you waited longer, then you could have died. But in the same sense, it's like we try to keep things hidden, but it's poisoning our whole body.
Yeah.
It's
That's
gonna
good.
lead us to
Amen.
spiritual death.
That's very good.
Yeah.
It's not seen, but it's certainly doing its job.
And this is I wanted to throw this out. So listeners, this is a lot of us, right? So partying, drinking, getting drunk, things that we know, just, they're in the Bible, right? Sex outside of marriage, same here. Me too, and all in the meanwhile, like there's just something missing. Like there's just this sense of being unfulfilled, still chasing all this stuff, right? Like you just get worn out, you get tired. So you had another lady too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just on that topic, that mirror, I was trying to look like them. I became them, but I became what they wanted to be. I was the cool guy. I became a promoter. I'm the guy with all the girls. I have the house with the alcohol, the parties. I have everything that they want, but it still didn't bring happiness.
That's good.
Still didn't bring it. Then I meet another woman while I was promoting at a club, and we got married. We took off to Vegas, got married out there. And so now I have a family. I have a wife, I have my son, and we end up having a kid together as well, my daughter. So now I have this family life. It's like, all right, I got a family life, I got to support them. I'm still going to indulge in sin on the side, but I'll make sure I take care of them. So and I thought about turning to God, but I'm like, you know what? I got it. I can do life without God on my own. But without God at the foundation, it always falls apart, which we ended up in divorce a couple years down the road, and that fell apart too. It's like the Tower of Babel. Tower of Babel, they were trying to build up to heaven to have the benefits of heaven, the peace, happiness, without God in it. Yeah. And it only led to confusion. And in the same way, I would attempt to build my life with all the benefits that heaven has to offer, God has to offer, but without God, it always leads to confusion.
Yeah.
And that's what that led to too, and that fell apart.
I want to call some things out for what it is too, because I mean, several people probably experience this, but so I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That's where I was raised. Phoenix, very similar. A lot of drugs, a lot of guns. You know, and it's just it's awakening when you're not looking for that, right? But then you start to hang out with these people that in that mirror, trying to please and everything, and then guns just show up. Drugs just show up along with it, and it's not who you're trying to be. It's not like what you're looking up to. You're looking in the mirror and you're like, that just happened. I just got a gun pulled on me. There's knives, there's drugs, there's cocaine around. There's all these different things that you're just like, what the heck just happened? You look at yourself in the mirror and it's like, that was a reality.
Yeah.
A gun just got pulled on me. Walk us through like anything that you want to share about just some of the things that where you're like, dang, like what was that? Like,
yeah, and you know what's crazy?
Yeah.
Is when I was in those moments, I was just so desensitized
It's a good
that
word
I
for
didn't
that.
realize it. Like I would be in the car with my friend, and next thing you know, it pulls out an 8-ball. I was like, I have to go sell this really quick. Or I'm jumping in the car with another buddy, and he's like, oh, I have some drops to do. Yeah, or another friend or gun, like you said, guns. They get pulled out by other people, by people that I know. Friends get shot. Yeah, there's been so many times that happens, and it's almost like I became numb to it, as horrible as that sounds. Of course, in the time, I'm like, this is crazy. What's going on? Like I would have glimpses of realization and be like, well, this isn't how I'm supposed to be living my life. I'm supposed to be living my life for Christ. But in the moment, it's just keep going with it, which is wild.
So bring us full circle, and then where you finally said, you know what, enough with this nonsense. I need Christ. I need to straighten my life. And how did that come to full point?
Yeah, so I go through my divorce. I get half custody of my daughter. And I'm just doing my thing, still without God. I'm pretty much broken down at this point, but I haven't hit my rock bottom. We all have to hit, a lot of times, that's what happens when people come to Christ. They hit their rock bottom, especially as men. Can be so stubborn.
Yeah.
I was still being stubborn. I'm like, I'm not giving in. I'm going to keep doing what I want to do. I meet my girlfriend, and
BB?
BB. Yeah, Leticia, her nickname's, we call her BB. I'll call her Baby, but other people call her.
That's okay. We won't call her baby, I promise.
Yeah, well, I have charisma.
What can I say?
And yeah, what could I say? So I bedazzle her and make her fall for me, but she gets a peek behind the curtains. And she's like, whoa, this guy has a lot of skeletons in his closet. So it scares her away, rightfully so, but she attends Cornerstone. It scares her away, and that's when I really hit rock bottom. I remember that brought me to the realization to where I'm like, man, there's this wonderful woman that I can't even hold on to because she sees how much I've indulged in sin and continue to do so. So I remember just sitting by the fire at my house, drinking, what was it? Jack Daniels. That was the cheap version. Something Bean.
Probably Jim Beam.
Jim Beam.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
So I'm just drinking Jim Beam, trying to save some money. I'm so cheap. And I'm looking at the fire, and I'm thinking, I need to change. If I don't change, there's no point in living. So contemplating suicide, like there's no point in living at this point. I've messed up so many different times. I've looked like what the world wants. I've had I've been the big party guy that everybody looked to and thought was the coolest guy ever. I had a family, and it looked like the family was going good, but they all just fall into shambles, and it's because I'm missing God in it. So I'm like, you know what? I need to change. Something needs to happen. So that was a very pivotal moment in my life to where
God moves in mysterious ways, and you had a guy who you said wasn't a Christ follower, but he was the person that kind of talked you off the edge. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I didn't know who to call. I'm like, who am I going to call and open up about this?
Yeah.
So I called my buddy, the one I used to live with when we were younger and party a bunch, and he talked me off the edge.
Yeah.
Thankfully, he talked some sense into me. And my wife, girlfriend at the time, was attending Cornerstone, so I said, you know what, I messed it up with her, but I know I could go see her at Cornerstone.
Nice.
I'll go say what's up to her at this church. Yeah. That was part of it. We were talking here and there, and she also encouraged me to go to church. So I started showing up, but I was still so stubborn and arrogant. I would tell her, I've been to church enough for 3 lifetimes. I grew up in church. I'd go to church 8 days out of the week. So I know everything. There's nothing there that the church can teach me.
Yeah.
And I would come with her, and even while I was sitting there in the purple chair, I would whisper in the ear, oh, he's going to talk about this. When Lynn or whoever was speaking would talk about whatever scripture they would want us to turn to, so I'd whisper in her ear and say, oh, he's going to talk about. And once I would kind of get an idea of what the big idea was, I would whisper in the ear, oh, he's going to touch on this and this. So I was completely arrogant, trying to prove to her that I didn't need to go to church and I can have a relationship with God outside of church. Yeah. But of course, God humbled me. He humbled me quick. Yeah. What was a pivotal moment then? So there was that moment that I was by the fire, and I'm like, something has to change. But I would say repentance. I was already talking with God, but Lynn led everybody in a prayer of repentance, and that was a moment where I just said, all right, I'm giving in. I'll go all in for you, God. And I realized that I can't do life without him.
Yeah. And I wanted to put out there, because I mean, this is available to a lot of individuals out there. If you didn't grow up in church, if you have been going to church, but church shop, find that message or worship team, whatever it is that's going to speak life into you, because it can happen when you least expect it, right? You're going through the motions, you maybe have something tugging at you, and then all of a sudden it just hits. Repetition's key, man. It's like working out. But you also started to lean in, and I love this about this, because this is where the mirror gets flipped. Is when you went to men's ministry, you started to see, and you're like, what the heck is this? Like, you were expecting one thing, it got flipped on you, and all of a sudden the mirror started to change towards Christ.
Yeah, because I didn't get involved for a good 3 years. I just hung back and said, well, I need to work on things in my life, so I'm not going to get involved yet. But those changes didn't really start happening until I got involved, until I started to create community with people who would hold me accountable. It pushed me and created motivation. And so the men's ministry, I started to volunteer, and that was very helpful. But when I got into the men's ministry, that definitely helped me out a whole lot. And I had this huge perception. I said, I'm not going to go to the men's ministry. A bunch of guys wanting to be tough. I don't need that. I'm happy. I don't need that extra fluff. I don't have to fake it, and there's going to be all macho in there. Finally, I stepped into the room, and as soon as I walk in, I don't know, I think it was Rod.
Probably Rod.
Probably Rod. It was a continuous thing that I seen, but as soon as I walk in the room, I see 2 guys hugging. Oh, I love you, man. I love you. I'm like, whoa, what's going on? Did I walk into the right room? What's going on? It was totally eye-opening. Everyone was just so loving, welcoming, open to discussing our lives and what we're working on in our walk with Christ. So best thing I ever did was get involved, because that really pushed me to start making those changes that I needed to.
And then awesome. Just to start closing, like that, talk us through that flip of that mirror now, right? Because now it's a different reflection.
Right. So it first took me to look in the mirror and look at myself and realize that life without Christ is impossible. You can't achieve that happiness without him.
Not at all.
That peace. And also realize that I needed to change. And then after that, it was reflecting it on Jesus and wanting to look like him instead of others. No matter what I'm going through, as long as I focus on him and trying to look like him, as we all do together,
Amen.
that's all that matters. And that brings so much more peace, because this world, you can never satisfy them. You can live up to the image that they give you, but there's always guidelines, rules, like, yeah, you want to be a part of this social class or group, then you got to do X, Y, Z. And if you don't do this, then we're going to cancel you. God says, no, I give you an identity. You're going to mess up. You're not going to be able to do X, Y, Z all the time, but no matter what, I still love you.
But I think the key also in all these things, as Jason and Ryan has brought up, is like-mindedness. Is that, as I tell my own daughter, hang with people who are like-minded. Iron sharpening iron is so key, because we get off track when we get with the world, because the world's got nothing to give us at all. But when you get with like-minded men, like at CS Men's, which is so powerful, it makes such a difference. So when you get into a pickle, you can lean out and make a call and say, can I meet you for a cup of coffee to help me off the ledge? And there are so many men who are on the ledge. So I'm so glad to hear that you're able to lean on somebody to get you off the ledge, because suicide is so dominant in this country today.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. So I want to really thank you for your testimony and your life. And we hear you teaching even at CS Men's, and how real your life is from this side of the mirror to the correct side of the mirror, and seeing it through Christ and your life that you led as well. So it's huge. But I'll tell you, folks, this young man has grown exponentially, and we so appreciate his transparency and all that he shared right now, just like the one before. But it's just so important that when you get in a pickle, you don't lean on the world, you don't lean on a bottle of booze, you come to Christ. Christ is the only way to give you resolution. And then once you're involved in the church, unlike Brian, don't wait 3 years. Get right involved, get into volunteer, and get into a men's program, because like-minded people, iron sharpens iron, and it makes a difference in the world. So Brian, thank you so much for your testimony and your life that we see every day at Cornerstone Church.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I would like to mention along with that is, and it's because I've had this discussion with people and people I love, just because I tell this story, there's this tragic story that led to Christ, which is the ultimate win. It makes people think that they don't have a testimony if they don't have some tragic story.
Well said.
And it's totally the opposite.
Correct.
If you're growing up in church, have a relationship with God and never fell away in ways that I've mentioned or others, that's the best testimony.
Yeah.
That's the very best testimony. Enoch in Genesis chapter 5, it talks about how he walked with God for 365 years and kept his commands. We find, and he didn't die. God took him up into heaven. Hebrews 11 talks about how he was so pleasing with God, and because so, he brought him up into heaven. That's the only two places he's really mentioned. You'll see him in genealogies and a few other places, but those are the only places you see him. He doesn't have this elaborate story like King David, Moses. Hey, all we know is he pleased God, walked with God, and God loved him so much because of that, he took him up into heaven.
Without dying.
Yeah.
Without dying.
Yeah.
I mean, 365 years is a long time to live. I would want to go to heaven at that time too, you know. But yeah, that's the best testimony is I don't want to say no testimony, but no tragic story. Because it's not fun wallowing in the mud with the pigs like the prodigal son.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. I wanted to thank you for that, Brian. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. I'll share something personal too. So I was actually at my house. We were meeting with these gentlemen just to kind of talk through some of their testimonies, and I couldn't agree with you more, Brian, because that's how I want my son to be able to view his faith and his journey and his testimony. And I got to speak to him afterwards, and he's like, "What are you guys doing?" And it's like, well, we're talking about all of the hurdles that we've been through to try to help other men build a better and stronger legacy, the next generation, you know, like you, my son, 12 years old. Like, I want you to have it. Yeah. Well, like, I want you to have a great testimony. I don't want you to have to go through a lot of the struggles that we're talking about, but it's healthy because real men being real men in front of other men, encouraging them and telling them how they can change this around to build and live a godly legacy is where it starts. You know,
Amen.
it's like we want our next generations to be empowered, to have those strong testimonies, to build up with faith-filled households. You know, and so I couldn't agree with you more, man. It's a great goal. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Share this content and continue to check us out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cool.
Brian, thank you so much.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good job, man.
Yeah.